ESCOM's Electricity Generation Division, as well as Ms. Stephanie Mokwena, ESCOM's spokesperson. Colleagues, I also greet all of you, the members of the media, those who are here with us, and those who are also following this media briefing on our live stream platform. I welcome you to this regular media briefing by the Minister of Electricity on the implementation of the Energy Action Plan. This briefing, in essence, seeks to, it's the Minister's basic effort to ensure that all South Africans are kept up to date with all the developments as they pertain to the implementation of the Energy Action Plan. I wish to also encourage members of the media and those who are following online to participate by sharing their questions, which will be responded to once the Minister has given us his opening remarks. I invite the Minister to the podium.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Zakani. And once more, good morning to members of the media, everyone that is watching back at home, and just once more to thank members of the media for occasioning an opportunity for us to get to convey to the general public, households, and also industry the work that we are doing to ensure that we are able to address the load shedding question. As the President indicated in the State of the Nation address, that load shedding remains a significant constraint to the South African economy, and this message was also repeated by the Minister of Finance on the occasion of the delivery of the budget, and he makes the point that load shedding and the inefficiencies on the logistics side are the structural weaknesses that undermine the prospects of an immediate growth in the South African economy, and these are areas that requires a concerted attention to ensure that we are able to realize, if you like, the kind of progress that is desired for us to be able to achieve the kind of growth levels that are necessary to get people into employment and ensure that we are able to broaden the flow of industrial capacity in the country. So I'm going to take you through essentially what has been the performance against the Energy Action Plan, as is the case. We do a minimum of just a briefing once in 2 weeks, unless there is an extraordinary occurrence. Will occasion opportunity for us to get to explain to the South African public what is the nature of the challenge that is facing us, and more importantly, what are the actions that we are taking to ensure that we are able to address that crisis. We have taken the liberty today to do a reconciliation, or if you like, complete a balance sheet of what has been the performance of the grid in the one calendar year. So the computation really seeks to do a 12-month calendar assessment from January of 2023 to January of 2024, so that there's a much more better appreciation, a more comprehensive analysis on the performance, and therefore we are able to derive significant insights and are able to track what I refer to as a trend line, so that we are able to get some degree of assurance that we are moving in the right direction. I have previously made the point that we have turned the corner. The President makes a point that they were closer to the resolution of this problem. And I think it's important that we are able to substantiate where these claims are coming from. And the best way of doing that is to ensure that you are able to do an analysis over an extended period. And we think that the calendar year is the most elegant way. We'll also do the financial year when we come beginning of April, what has been the performance, so that South African can be able to see what the trend line is. Because what the trend line does, it also gets to account for your significant outliers. So there's going to be moments of significant setbacks like we experienced during that the week of the 8, 9, 10, when we escalated to stage 6, we're able to explain what the situation was. But I think that when we get to higher levels of load shedding, it gets to dim, if you like, an appreciation of what the trend line is. And also the occurrence now at Kendal, when we had to ramp up to stage 4, when in fact we are going along in a manner that illustrates that we are indeed getting closer to the resolution of this question. Remember that before that disruption during the day, we're at stage 2 and stage 0, no load shedding, and then taking up to stage 2 during PMD. And when we get to be hit with those occurrences, I think we get to be lost in the moment, as is the case because of the nature of the impact that load shedding is. And of course, we get to lose on what is the general trend line. So I think it's important that we're able to step back and share what that general trend line is. And I really want to some degree of detail on what has been the 12-month performance calendar year, January 2023 to January 2024. Of course, some of it will go into February of 2024 because we've got the benefit of the past 2 weeks of February. The first thing is that we are seeing this improvement in the energy availability factor. And let me just say to the general public, when I talk EAF, I really refer to 2 major issues, variables. The rate at which the units are failing on their own, and also the efficiency of these units. So those that are not failing and are remaining on load, are they performing closer to what is their design capacity? So if, like going back to my metaphor of a car, if the car is designed to reach maximum speeds of 120 kilometers per hour, yes, it's moving, is it reaching those speeds? And if those speeds are significantly lower, it means that in this instance that the efficiency is lower. So really those are the 2 key variables that we are attending to. And we had said that there has to be a bit of science in how we want to confront this question of improving the EAF. So what the team at ESCOM, given the in-depth knowledge that they have, first in relation to, if you like, the installed capacity of these units, but also what the areas where we think we can derive a maximum opportunity if we were to fix this unit. We're able to isolate about 6 units for particular attention. And we thought that those of you who have done science, there's something we call the Pareto principle. For a little effort, we are able to get back a significant amount of returns, benefit. So what we call the 80-20 principle. So what Pareto said, for 20% of the effort, you are going to get about 80% of the returns. So we did that computation across the fleet of ESCOM power stations. And we identified that there's huge opportunities if we were to address the situation at Kgosientsho. And remember at the time when we generated these interventions, Kgosientsho, we had the 3 units that were out. Essentially, we had 2,400 megawatts that was out. And in our own analysis, we felt that a concerted effort in ensuring that we are able to truncate the return period of these 3 units, we're likely going to get much earlier the benefit of the 2,400 megawatts. And then there was a Kendal situation. Kendal, really, the main issue there was the fact that when we ran these units, we were exceeding our emissions parameters. So it was important that we find a way of ensuring that we're able to maximize, if you like, the performance of these units without reaching what the emission parameters. Majuba, one of those power stations that we identified, Mata, one of those power stations that identified, Tutuka at the time. I think we're running 1 out of the 6 units. Of course, 1 unit is out, will not be coming back. So essentially 1 out of 5 units. So we felt that it is important that we place some additional attention on Tutuka. And one of the major decisions that we're taking was to redeploy rather, one of the most seasoned, experienced power station managers, Mr. Bruce Moyo, to go and be in charge of, if you like, the recovery of Tutuka. And we're beginning to see some of those results bearing fruit. We are getting to a situation where we can have about 3 of the units generating at any given time. And then Duva was also identified to be one of those. And we have seen that when we went through the winter period, as a result of the early interventions interventions that were made at Duva. Duva was one of the best performing power stations. So these are the 6 power stations that were identified. And then in the course of that, there was an admission that I think we can benefit significantly from the participation of other experienced people who are outside, if you like, the domain of ESCOM. And that's through the NICOM arrangement, the National Electricity Crisis Committee. Is a committee that the President has put together to support the Minister of Electricity in this instance to ensure that we were able to deliver on our promise on ending load shedding and using the EAF as a blueprint to address that situation. We're able to draw additional expertise from private sector to work with us, and some of them were then dispersed to work at this power station. What has been the benefit over that period of 12 months? Where after we had identified what is possible here, I'm happy to say to the country that over that period of 12 months, January 2023 to January 2024, we've been able to get back 3,510 megawatts as a result of this intervention. And these interventions are not complete. I mean, there's still additional work that we must do at Tutuka, like I said. There's additional work that continues to be done at Kandal and Matra and the other power stations. Of course, Kusile were successful in retaining those 3 units that had gone out, and of course we have synchronized Unit 5, and then towards the end of the year, Unit 6 will come on stream. So in that period, that 3,510 megawatts were recovered. And then the second point that intervention were made on the back of the support, the fiscal support that we received from the Minister of Finance. Remember that there were legacy issues at the ESCOM balance sheet still remains constrained, and as a result of that, ESCOM was unable to invest significantly in maintenance. And then we had to go to National Treasury to say this is the situation that is faced by ESCOM. We requested a fiscal, if you like, relief, some intervention to help us to carry out some much needed interventions. And one of the areas of priority interventions that were identified in ESCOM was the need for us to ensure that we are able to invest in the maintenance of these units. The sunk cost, we have already suffered this cost, we have already expended this cost. These units need to be sweated, we need to extract as much megawatts as possible, and we went to National Treasury for that assistance. And how have we fared in relation to that? So we have placed a part of that fiscal support to ensure that we invest aggressively on the maintenance side. And I want to indicate that if you look at what has been the maintenance, if you were to take the period of December 2023 to January of 2024, why am I isolating that period? I'm isolating that period because traditionally in ESCOM, the December period, because companies are winding down, they are closing, your energy-intensive users are no more in action, you have some degree of relief on the demand side. So you are using that opportunity of December, early January to be aggressive on the maintenance. And what is it that we have achieved? So during that period, we then ramped up maintenance to up to 9,000 megawatts. Put this into context, when we were during the December, the winter period of 2023, that planned maintenance was averaging about 3,000 megawatts. So we added another 6,000 megawatts on planned maintenance on the back of the support that we received from National Treasury. And as a result of that, we took out on average 18% of the generation capacity, and that 18% was placed on planned maintenance to allow us an opportunity to work that when we return these units, I'm able to stand before the public and say, we have not experienced any hours of load shedding. And in fact, you will not need any account from me because you will be experiencing it at home. So the point I'm making is that during that period of the December 2022 to January 2023, compared to December 2023 and January 2024, we're able to reduce the hours of load shedding by about 600 hours. So it's an important milestone to register. And I must say that also working on the reduction on the intensity of this load shedding. Remember the point I made earlier on. that load shedding in its totality is unacceptable. But we have accepted, we have come to a situation that it has become a daily occurrence. So gradually we want to reduce that intensity of load shedding. So you get into a situation where we should not get accustomed to stage 6, which, like I said, we should not be accustomed to any form of load shedding. So that's the first statement I'm making. The second one is that given the obtaining circumstances, there are those stages of load shedding that are totally unacceptable. And that's why every time when we get to a stage above 4, we get to 5, 6, we occasion an opportunity to explain to the country what is it that has happened. Again, let's put this into context. When ESCOM announced the summer plan, if you remember, they made the point that, well, we think that will be averaging about stage 4. And then you will know, I mean, by your own account, is that we have outperformed that. We have been at stage 3 and lower stages, occasionally at stage 4, and that's the point that I'm trying to make, is that trend line, and ultimately we want to get to a situation where we are able to eliminate load shedding in its totality. So what is the next statement I'm making regarding the 12 months that was, is that the trend line is in the positive. What is those positive? Is that the unplanned capacity loss factor, the reliability of these units, the partial load losses is coming down. We're averaging at about 17,000 megawatts. Now we're averaging at about 14,000 megawatts. So we've been able to claw back 3,000 megawatts. But that 3,000 megawatts also, we've reinvested it back by ensuring that we ramp up plant maintenance. And as you ramp up plant maintenance, you are eating into your available capacity, which compromises, negates the improvements that we want to see on the EAF in the short term, but in the long term, we are going to make that, we are going to see that benefit. I think it's important that we share this with South Africans, that we are doing everything possible to ensure that we bring the trend line down, the regularity of load shedding, its frequency and its intensity, and then we'll get to a stage where we'll be able to stand before the public with confidence and say we have ended load shedding. Of course, it's a function of other things. I've just focused for now on the performance on the ESCOM side. Of course, as we always do, we'll also occasion a briefing that talks to new generation capacity. Because you can't over-rely on the ESCOM performance alone. You need new generation capacity. The President has announced reforms on the generation side. We've seen significant uptake of the private sector. We know the studies that have been done by ESCOM and the South African Wind Energy Association that there's an investment, a pipeline rather, of about 66 gigawatts that is sitting with the private sector. The only constraint there is on the transmission side. And I did make the promise the last time that once we finalize those discussions on the transmission side, how we're going to configure the financing, and I must say, just intimate that we're closer to or finding that structure on the financing. You will see that we'll be ramping up investments on the financing so that we're able to get the full benefit of a new generation capacity. You'll know, those who are following the energy complex in the country, that big window number 6 is about 2,000 to 3,000 megawatts that remains unallocated because of the constraint on the transmission side. And we have made the point that in terms of the ESCOM transmission development plan, that has got a 10-year horizon. The expectation is that we need to roll out 14,000 kilometers of new lines to be able to aggressively accommodate new generation capacity in the Cape provinces, Northern Cape, Eastern Cape, and the Western Cape, where there's no or little grid capacity. That investment will require something in the order of magnitude of about 400 billion rands. ESCOM alone will not be able to carry that, of course, with the National Transmission Company of South Africa. On their balance sheet, they will not be able to carry that. So you need new sources of financing without relinquishing state ownership of the grid. And that configuration, I'm happy to say that is coming towards finality. That bespoke solution on how we're going to finance transmission already. We have cabinet has agreed that the minister must proceed with those if you like, configurations of how we're going to finance that. So what we know is that we are not short of money. It's just the instrument or the platform that we'll use for us to be able to get private sector investments into the transmission, and we make it possible for us to be able to unlock those megawatts that are there. And then we have done a computation, what I always do, just to show you what has been the performance over using the baseline of May, but I think I've covered it using the January of 2023 to the February to the January of 2024, essentially communicating the message that the key variable on the unplanned capacity loss factor is such that it's coming down. We're not now averaging 17,000, we're averaging about 14,000. We have recovered that 3,000 megawatts. That's the point that we are conveying. And that's the point. I think I'm giving you a graphic illustration of what is, so you look at what is that trend line, you can see that we are moving from highs of about 18,000 megawatts of unplanned capacity loss factor, and then we're averaging 14,000, and in some periods we're even hitting about 12,000 megawatts. And I know that ESCOM, through the head of generation, they are even setting themselves much more aggressive targets, because we think that we know, not we think, that we're capable of even reaching this 14,000 megawatts, reaching 13,000 megawatts consistently. And that's the work that Mr. Numa and the team are working on to ensure that we bring down the rate of failure of these units. And when maintenance then starts to taper down, when we go into the winter period, we're going to get back to like 3,000 megawatts, because now as I speak to you, planned maintenance, I think today we're sitting at about 8,200 megawatts. When you go to the winter period, it will come down substantially. We can get 3,000 to 4,000 megawatts. If we improve the unplanned capacity loss factor, we add another 1,000 to 1,500 megawatts. Suddenly the picture improves by a net of about 5,000 megawatts. That's the point I'm making. And once we get to those levels, you will see significant improvements in the availability. And maybe just to close, just to say that what the experience we had on Thursday was that we lost a number of units. We lost 5 generating units at Kenda, and we also lost a unit at Ruma. I'm happy to say that, and then Kendal unit number 1 was taken out on Wednesday evening at 8, and this had to do with the leaking in the safety valve. Of course, I will not go into that engineering detail, but of course, the team has been able to get to the root cause. That's the point that I am trying to convey. And then we also had a situation where the issues that have to relating to auxiliary cooling towers, which uses demineralized water, ran low, and as a result of that, of this auxiliary cooling water running low, we had to discontinue or pull back the generation from the 4 other units at Kendal. So essentially over that period, we lost about 5 units at Kendal. Kendal is one of your significant generators. Like I said, I think it's 600 megawatt each unit, so you can imagine when we take out 5 units, it means that there's 3,000 megawatts essentially that we have removed. These 3 stages of load shedding, and that's what called on the ramping up of the stages of load shedding. The intensity that we saw Friday, Saturday, and of course we're beginning to come down. I'm happy to say the following in relation to Kendal, that we have returned unit number 4 returned on the 23rd of February. Unit number 3 returned on the 25th of February. That is yesterday on Sunday, and then we are expecting that Kendal 5 is going to return by later today, midday towards the late afternoon. So essentially by close of business today, we should have returned 3 of the 5 units, and then we are expecting to return unit number 1, number 2 rather midweek, and then unit number 1 at Kendal is on planned maintenance. So I think it's important that there's that appreciation that we are going to have those temporary setbacks. This was a setback. The team identified what was the root cause. These lessons will then be exported to other power stations so that we don't suffer, if you like, a similar fate in relation to those power stations. So I think it's important that we also learn from these mistakes, and I do want to emphasize that's a mistake that has happened. The team has acknowledged. We are addressing that, and management, it's a management issue. They'll address that. From where I'm seated, when are these units returning? Are we going to draw lessons from these units and they have indicated that 3 of these units, 2 have already returned, the other one is expected by later today, and the other one midweek, the other one on planned maintenance. So we remain on the right course. So if we didn't have this setback, we would have maintained that stage 0 during the day, stage 2 in the evening. As we return more and more units, you are going to see the relenting of the intensity of load shedding. So the general point really I want to make as I leave the stage is to say the trend line remains positive. We are confident about our ability, the intervention on ESCOM is a major player, and then of course if we are to add the new generation capacity, which is now throttled by the fact that you've got challenges on the transmission side. Once we resolve those issues, we are on the right course to attend the load shedding and deliver on the energy action plan as announced and unveiled by the President in July of 2022. Thanks, Takan.
Thank you very much, Minister. Colleagues, we will now commence with the questions from members of the media. We will start with questions from those who are in the room, and those will be followed by those who are sending their questions on the GCIS WhatsApp group. By show of hands, we'll take questions. Please introduce yourself and your media house. We'll start with Antoinette.
Antoinette Slowert from Rapport. Minister, the last time we were together here, we were suffering stage 6. And you then informed us that stage 6 would most probably continue, that was Sunday until the Wednesday. We hardly left this venue. Then ESCOM sent out a media release saying we're reducing to stage 5. I just want to know whether you knew that before the briefing. And if you knew that, why didn't you inform us? Why did you tell us that we would be at stage 6? Or does ESCOM not tell you what they're planning to do? If you can explain what happened there, please. And then when does ESCOM plan to start reducing the high level of plant maintenance? Thank you.
Thank you, Antoinette.
Thank you very much. Muluku Mloto from the ENCA. Minister, when you speak of the planned expansion of the transmission lines from the Cape that will avail about 2,300 megawatts, and I heard you talking about the fact that you're still going to have to go and raise this money. Maybe first part of that question is, how will this assist? If you were to do that, say, in a few months' time, a miracle happens, how will this assist in terms of the continuous load shedding that South Africans are experiencing? But considering the fact that you still don't have money, still going to convince people with money to come and assist, what are the timelines? Are we talking here about, yes, a decade? How?
Thank you.
I am Katlagolo Odi from the SABC. Adding on to what Moloko has said, we need assurance in terms of when we'll see the work starting to roll on the transmission lines. We've heard that we need a 14-kilometer transmission lines that will come through to help ESCOM, and that plans are afoot to more or less just iron those issues out. When can we expect to see that particular process underway? And also, I wanted to find out about the CEO. Are we still set to see the new CEO take office there at ESCOM on the 1st of March? And what would be the expectations from the Minister where this particular role of the CEO is concerned? Thank you.
Thank you, but any more questions in the room? If not, we'll go to Ishmael.
Thank you, Chairperson. The first question is from William Hall, Network 24. How does the Minister reconcile the statements that ESCOM's performance in lowering UCLF and that the reliability of units with what has happened with Kendall and previously with the breakdowns that led to stage 6? With the Minister referring to the improving EAF, can you please explain the fact that the current marginally higher year-on-year EAF is not much better, despite the Kusile are now online while they were not a year ago. What does the minister ascribe the failure of ESCOM to sell off its ESCOM Finance Company in time to avoid penalties from Treasury due to non-compliance with the Debt Relief Act? The next set of questions is Hemlo, Priest, Independent Media. Any update on why non-ESCOM generation fell so much from August and is now negative year-on-year in November? Why did the non-commercial generation drop from 723 megawatts to 0? The last set of questions, Terence Creamer, Engineering News. The budget review published last week indicated that a request for proposals will be launched by the end of July for a private transmission pilot project, which is being developed with the support of the IFC. Is this initiative in line with what the minister has been planning in the area of grid investment? If so, could the minister provide details on what the RFP will seek to build, when it will be built, and what financial model will be used? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Krishna. We'll start with Mr. Eric Shanmugam, followed by the Minister.
Hi, good morning all. My name is Eric Shanmugam. I'm in the Office of the Group Executive in Generation. Antoinette, just to respond, the Minister will definitely give you his feedback in terms of the ramp down. But I think I need to make the media aware that the system operator manages the system real time. And sometimes the decision that they make, between the time they make the decision and by the time we get our spokesmen to communicate, there is a lead time. So I don't think there's any malicious intent not to give good news to the media, right? But it's around the supply and demand, and when basically there's a shortage of demand, we know what we do in terms of ramping up. But equally, if there's good wind and PV resources, which we know at this stage is non-dispatchable, the system operator is managing the system. And if there's good resources coming from the wind and from PV, they do what they have to do to balance the system. So I think I just wanted to also make it clear here that they also operate independent to generation, because they are looking at the national generation coming in. In terms of the plan, there will be a conscious effort. We will communicate the winter plan, and as you know, from around March, there's a conscious effort to drop planned maintenance to below 3,500 megawatts. So you should start seeing this ramp down of planned maintenance get to around 5,500 in March, and then from around April and May, there will be a conscious effort there to actually control planned maintenance between 3,000 and 3,500 megawatts. The other question, which I probably want to reaffirm because it's been in the slides that you will get, is that when you look at what happened in December and in January, so there's availability and there's unavailability. And when you look at the breakdowns, it's uncontrolled unavailability. The planned maintenance is controlled unavailability. And there's been a conscious effort to ramp up planned maintenance to around 18%. Now, 18%, if you really go and look at, I think the last we trended around 18% was around November 2020, if I'm not mistaken. And once again, we know what happened there during COVID. We had a drop in demand. So when you look at the net impact of EAF, even if we trended around 13,000 as previous years, which we normally do because we know that schools close around the December, we know that the big industry actually shuts down over the December period, and we make a conscious effort to ramp up on planned maintenance, but also take advantage to do opportunity maintenance. So let's say hypothetically there's an extra 4% on PCLF. That 4% negated against availability. So year-on-year trend, if I compare January stats, yes, there was a marginal improvement year on year, but in terms of the net impact, there was a conscious and a deliberate intent to actually do planned maintenance. We've had the money, to do philosophy maintenance, and we want to see the knock-on effect of this planned maintenance come into the future years, actually, helping us with the reliability of the fleet. On Kendall, I think when we reported the 6 priority stations, I want to highlight that Kendall, we've been very vocal around not realizing the benefits, but when you really get down to the root causes of Kendall, if we start to resolve the milling problems, the milling plant problems, we should actually see Kendall achieve similar results like the other priority 6 stations that we've been focusing on. Just in terms of clarity, we had promised 2 units yesterday. Kendall 5 did return to service, but it tripped once again in terms of milling plant losses. And we are hopeful that by the end of today, we'll have Unit 5 back. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Maybe just Antoinette, to your question. I think Eric answers one part. So it's a real-time issue. So that's fine. And it's a system operator that will have a sense of a dashboard what is real-time. The second reason is it's been more fundamental to me. I will not, even with the knowledge, before we got here, I was told about the possibility of a reduction to stage 5. But there's a principle there. What is the principle? The Minister of Electricity will not announce the intensity of load shedding, whether it's going up or down. That responsibility resides with ESCOM, and Ms. Daphne when I will communicate that. I will never usurp her responsibility. And once she has announced that, on the back of that, then we'll come to explain ourselves. I think it's important that there's an appreciation in the country that the source of this information, whether we're going higher stages or lower stages, resides with ESCOM. And as I speak to you now, the mouthpiece of ESCOM in that regard is Ms. Mugwena. And then she will release that statement. Yes, I did have the knowledge when I came here. And they were telling us that we are likely going to go to stage 5. But I stuck to what was prevailing and what I was told over the period. When they go to stage 5, they'll make that announcement. But just to your question and just the comfort to the country, I get to be told all the time. Even before, as they go to higher stages, they'll notify me, Minister, we're going to this stage because of the following, so that if I'm on a platform and they've already released their statement, I'm able to substantiate to the extent that I know what the issues are. So I will not usurp those functions. They'll announce, I will tell the country where we are, the reason why we are there, and once they release their statement on the back of Ms. Mugwena or ESCOM, then we'll be able to substantiate. And then we'll go on the issue of transmission and data, absolutely correct. I think the one thing that is throttling the ability of the country to realize new generation capacity is this thing called transmission. So just to the rest of the country, transmission are the highways and the byways that are meant to convey these electrons, that are energy carriers that helps us to provide the electricity. The opportunities we have in the country for new generation capacity from renewable energy sources in the Cape provinces, Northern Cape, Western Cape, Eastern Cape. Northern Cape with the best irradiation level, the quality of the sun, and the period that the sun is out is significantly higher than any part of the country. On the coastal areas, the Western Cape and the Eastern Cape, we've got some of the best wind speeds, and therefore the ability for us to exploit and wind generation capacity resides in those areas, but there's no ability for us to evacuate. So it's like you're producing cars, but there's no where they are going to travel. Because the concentration of your road network, in this instance transmission, is in the northeastern part, because they are following where the power stations are, and then there was no significant investment in the Cape provinces for obvious reasons. We will not have a problem of money. In fact, what people, I can tell you, I can quantify to over that money, that amount that the ESCOM has proposed of about 400 billion rand. So what we know which is in public is the jet financing. You know that jet IP is gone up to about $12 billion US. So that's a significant amount of investment. So there you are talking about 200 billion rand already just from that facility. And then there are other players, they'll make that public when at the right time, but we'll also make it public once we have engaged with them. So we are not sitting with the money problem. We are sitting with the structuring problem, how we are going to access that. And the point I was making earlier on, was that we are at an advanced stage. So I don't want to release the information in bits and pieces because we need to complete that engagement internally. I must say to the country that we've been moving with lightning speed. I mean, if you look at the period where we conceptualize what this bespoke solution is, which is towards the end of October last year to where we are. I mean, ordinarily this would have taken people about a year to 18 months to conceptualize. We are there. I'm confident that in the next 2 weeks, I'll be coming back to the country to say, this is how we're going to access it. And then once we know where this money lies, it's just the instrument of accessing it. So there has to be an appreciation on speed. You are going to access it, speed. Of course, there's issues around the cost of that money. Whether components of it is concessional, whether components of it is grant financing. And then we know that once you have done that, you have to construct the actual lines. So we're looking at EPC plus F. So engineering, procurement, construction plus financing. Really, that's what we're looking at. And we're looking at a build, operate, transfer model. So you need to design those bespoke solutions clearly on what that means. And that's an issue that is receiving clarity in government. And then it's the speed of procurement. And I've made the point earlier on that there are lessons we have drawn from the IPP program. That if this unit is at an arm's length from the state, we are likely going to be faster in procuring that. And of course, in that equation, there's the NTCA, the National Transmission Company of South Africa. And remember that the work that we're doing on additional money is on top of what Eskom has already been allocated for the transmission. I think they can do 1,400 kilometers in the next 3 years. That financing is in place. Eskom will proceed. But we are saying on the back of that, we need to be more aggressive in the rollout of transmission so that we're able to buttress the work of Eskom and we're able to get additional resources and we're a bit more aggressive as opposed to the initial horizon of 10 years to build this 1,400, you can build it perhaps in about 7 years. And then we must also resolve other issues. Is the readiness of the industry to participate in that space. So it's one thing to raise the money. It's one thing to procure. It's quite another for you to have the equipment, the lines, the towers, either imported. I assume that in the initial period you are likely going to import, but we need to industrialize on the back of this, which is the point that the Minister of Finance makes, is the point that the President makes in the SOPA, is the point that they were engaging with Minister DTIC, so that we are able to localize production on the back of this aggressive investment. They see through over the next 7, if you take the more optimistic horizon, or 10 years of demand. So you need to localize this so that when you talk about that just energy transition, remember a big component of it is about the net jobs. The net jobs should be positive. So because you are producing other jobs that are helping in the expansion of the transmission, which offsets jobs that could be lost as a result of the decommissioning of the unit. So you have to resolve that question of the readiness of the industry. And then we must standardize the procurement process. So the team must work on the standardization because that's the value you are going to derive from this. The IPP office has done it exceptionally well. So we're not rewriting what the IPP has said. We are simply adapting it from the generation to the transmission side. So you need to standardize the procurement documents. That's the other thing. And then the other thing that you need to resolve is the corridor. What are these priority corridors? So Eskom has identified, I think, about 3 priority corridors, and Mloto, you are right. In relation to those 3 priority corridors, we are likely going to get an additional 2,300 megawatts. So these are instances where you could have a private producer and a private buyer and off-taker. There's a PPA arrangement there. What undermines the ability of that transaction to close is the unavailability of the line. Then you have to, we know that there's a possibility, if you have to do the line, of course, it benefits 2 parties, but our consideration is that the net picture on the generation side, the grid improved by 2,300 megawatts. And then there are transformers, that the 400 kV lines, you must get these big transformers also. It's also about the ability of industry to produce or the rate at which you are able to import. So what is the point I'm making is that there's a matrix of variables that we are resolving. We are not just resolving the financing. We are not just resolving the governance. We are not just resolving the readiness of industry. You are not just resolving the speed of procurement. You are resolving all of those things together. And that's what has taken a bit of time. But in the context of what is possible in this, I think we've moved with lightning speed. You will see when I come to share with you how far we are. And where do you house this unit? That is going to help you to do it aggressively. Because you don't want it to be trapped in an over-bureaucratized environment. You still want to observe governance framework, transparent, clean, speed, agility, but it must be done in a manner that appreciates the moment and the agency for us to be able to procure. And then all of the years, I mean, there are instances where you don't necessarily need new lines. All that you need to do is to improve the existing capacity of the transformers. So there is about procuring bigger transformers, replace the smaller ones with the new ones, and suddenly you are able to get the additional megawatts. So when we come back, as I answer all of these questions, you're seeing there's a matrix I've made there. Then I'll be able to tell you that over this period we expect to get so many megawatts as a result of this intervention. That's the point I'm making, Moloto and Katlego, and I think someone else raised the question. And then Katabo, yes, Mr. Den Marokan is expected on the 1st of March to start as a CEO. And then on the issue around William Eskom Finance Company being sold, that's a shareholder responsibility, and I'm sure that Minister Gordhan will explain that with a degree of confidence. So we've agreed issues that has to do with the governance issues, what the shareholder responsibility is the domain of Minister Gordhan. Responsible for generation, responsible for transmission. I'm just responsible of getting these megawatts and resolving load shedding. Of course, it's a function of other structuring issues. Like I said, on this one is in the domain of Minister Gordhan. And maybe, Terence, to your point, now we're working with the IFC, we're working with National Treasury. So we've pulled all of these things together. Because previously there were disparate players and government didn't seem to have a more coherent approach on how you want to tackle the transmission question. That has been brought under the auspices of the Minister of Electricity, or Minister in the Presidency responsible for electricity. So we're putting everyone together. So whatever I'm sharing with you is our government intervention on transmission. And this is the only authoritative body that can articulate that. And I must say that in that equation, everyone is accommodated. So we are speaking on behalf of everyone. Thanks.
Thank you very much to the Minister and to Mr. Shonakan for the responses and the clarity. We'll now take our second round of questions. This is our last round of questions, so if there are any follow-up questions or additional questions, we'll take those. There's Antoinette.
Minister, at our first briefing, or your first briefing this year, you said when we meet again you will unveil the transmission funding plan. And then the transmission company board was appointed, and it first had, my understanding was it first had to go to them. Have they indicated when they will finalize whatever they have to do in this regard, and what else is still needs to be done before it can be unveiled? Thank you.
Thank you, Antoinette. Are there any other questions in the room? Ishmael, do you have questions online?
Just one, Chairperson. Lamis Omarji, News 24. For clarity, by the end of today, will all of Kendall's units have returned to sales? That's all. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I guess we'll start with Mr. Shonakan, and we'll conclude with the rest.
Thank you very much. I think just in terms of response to the MEs, I think we've communicated the status. So we pretty much have 2 units. We can expect another unit today. Unit 5, as I said, tripped yesterday on milling load losses. So we should have another unit by today. Then we will have, by midweek, we should have Kendall Unit 2 back. And then as a result of that leaking valve, Unit 1 has been taken out. It's now also gone into planned maintenance. So we'll have 4 units by the end of this week. And then just to complement the feedback from the Minister on the Eskom Finance Company, I think I just want to reassure William that in terms of, we are working with National Treasury. There's no impact in terms of the debt relief conditions, and the work continues as has been highlighted by the Minister to finalize the disposal conditions for EFC, and that Eskom is working hard at. I think those were the 2 questions that you gave. Thank you.
Thanks, Antoinette, for that question. Maybe just 2 parts. So the transmission development plan exists, so it's outside me. So essentially, it's Eskom's articulation on the modernization and new lines that needs to be built in the next 10 years. And then out of that plan, they say they can finance the first 3 years of that, which is 1,400 kilometers, which is 10% of what is required over the 10-year period. Beyond the 3 years, there is no certainty if that financing will come. So what I was announcing myself is the financing in line with the TDP. So we're not writing a transmission development plan. That already exists. So essentially is to say that in addition to the work that Eskom is doing, we need to raise funding to ensure that we ramp up and we bring early that horizon from 10 years to earlier. But then you must resolve all the issues I've raised about capacity of industry, the instrument, and all of that. The only reason why, part of the reason, not the only one, is that the NTCSA, as you have made a correct observation, was then unveiled. So it's important that when the minister stands here and talks about what government approach is, we've accommodated the NTCSA. Because the last thing you want is for us to articulate this position, and NTCSA is not familiar with what we are doing to ensure that we raise new financing. Because ultimately those assets will revert back to them. So those are part of the conversations we are concluding. So that when I come before you and say this is the route we are taking, is a route that is also blessed by the NTCSA. If you come to think of it, it's part of government. It's an SOE, they must buy into this. So it's important that we respect it. And that's the engagement that is happening at that technical level. And when I come back to you, then it has accommodated everyone. So the point, Antoinette, the TDP exists. All we are doing is the financing of that TDP, in addition to the financing that already exists for the first 3 years. We want to ramp it up to ensure that we're a bit more aggressive and we're able to get cheap money and all of that. Some of it Eskom can access as a result of its compromises or weaknesses of its balance sheet. So we have to find a bespoke solution on how we raise that money. And by the way, the things I'll be announcing to the country, they are not novel, they are not new. They are done all in many parts of the world. It's simply that we have domesticated them. We have given them South African characteristics on how we want to access that liquidity. Like I said earlier on, we are not sitting with a money problem. We are sitting with a structural problem on how you are going to access that money and give assurances to any investor that in fact their money is safe. And then there are also issues around the solution we are seeking to design will not rely on sovereign guarantees, because we don't want to go that route. And there are many parts of the world that have not gone through that route. You need to protect, if you like, the revenue streams coming out of that investment so that you can safeguard that money. And then there are other institutions that have offered to sit behind, if you like, the government in raising that money. And if you look at this institution, they are AA plus credit rated, so it means that the money will be cheaper. So those are the kind of conversations we are finalizing, really, on a bespoke solution on how we are going to finance. But once more, let me take the opportunity to thank everyone for making time to join us. We really don't take this for granted, and to give you the assurance that we continue to work very hard to resolve the challenge of load shedding. Thank you very much, colleagues. Wish you the best of the week. Thank you.
Colleagues, thank you once again to the Minister as well as the colleagues from ESCOM, and the reiteration of the appreciation that the Minister has expressed to you. Thank you for your attention, your continuous attendance and coverage of these EAP media briefings. The intention in essence is to ensure that South Africans are not left out on what is happening, as this challenge affects all South Africans. So thank you very much. We'll share the details of our next EAP media briefing in due course.